When performing at his peak, what causes a comedic legend to retire? Jon Stewart's departure from The Daily Show after 16 years was as devastating as an earthquake. We all wondered, why now? When fans felt the punchline wasn't funny. Stewart's departure was heartbreaking since he pioneered contemporary political comedy. What, though, led this comic creator to finally call it quits? Come on, let's work this out. The Daily Show was transformed by Jon Stewart, who did more than just run it. Until he shot to fame in 1999, the show was little more than a lighthearted spin on the nightly news. It became a cultural behemoth under Stewart's stewardship, slicing through society's silliness via comedy. In a way that the conventional media failed to see, Stewart transformed a satirical show into a watchdog. A smart editorial essay couldn't hold a candle to his humor. However, how was his method novel? His ability to blend humor with biting critique was second to none. The 24-hour news cycle provided Stewart with an unending source of criticism, which he skillfully turned into comedy gold by exposing hypocrisy, double standards, and political play. As amusing as it was, it had deep significance. He did more than mock the headlines, he dismantled them, exposing their bias and weakness. You might recall the now famous Rally to Restore Sanity and/or Fear. This spoof piece was unique among its peers. While combining humorous asides with heartfelt pleas for reconciliation, Stewart and Colbert utilized a live broadcast to condemn the partisan split in American media. You might find someone else who can make you laugh while also making you think about democracy. Still, there were times when Stewart's humor was difficult to decipher. When he asked questions, people would ponder about them long after they stopped laughing. While discussing touchy topics like climate change and corporate greed, Stewart had his audience look away. Instead of providing immediate solutions, he encouraged critical thinking. Questions such, "What does it mean if our institutions are failing and comedy is left to fill the void?" would be his typical line of questioning. It was more than just a coincidence. The show's alteration was very personal. Stewart saw himself to be more than simply a comedian. He fancied himself a crusader for honesty in a deceitful society. He encouraged his audience to find humor in the face of bad news by asking, "If we don't laugh at the crazy, how will we live through it?" in every speech he gave. The cultural shift he ushered in is also important to remember. John Oliver, Samantha Bee, and Trevor Noah were all able to gain their starts on The Daily Show thanks to him. Stewart instilled in each of his successors the belief that humor had the power to educate while also entertaining. Stewart possessed intelligence in both the jokes he delivered and the timing of his delivery. When Stewart arrived with his endearing blend of candor and humor, the American public was beginning to lose trust in conventional news outlets. He inspired a generation to keep educated via comedy rather than terror, and he shifted the focus of those who didn't normally care about politics to them. The worry, however, increased in tandem with the compliments. Stewart's comedic material was costly. He appeared relaxed on television, but in reality, he was under a lot of pressure behind the scenes. How do you have an optimistic outlook when you find fault with everything that matters to you? When things seem to be getting worse all the time, how can you maintain your optimism? Many times, Stewart would make light of the absurdity of his position by saying things like, "If your main source of news is a fake news show, we've got a bigger problem." Millions of viewers continued to tune in night after night because they believed he would tell them the truth via humor. He was really serious about the responsibility, perhaps even too much so. One lingering issue persisted: what transpires when satire seems to be yelling into thin air? For Stewart, this wasn't only a concept. People began to assault him when his jokes became funnier. Some thought he was overly honest, too confrontational, or too critical. However, viewers were drawn in by its authenticity. The Daily Show wasn't the only thing Stewart altered. The way we watch movies and TV was transformed by him. He proved that lightheartedness does not weaken truth, but rather amplifies it. Although his writing was well received, few realized his significance as a sanity check in a mad society. How much did it take to get that level of genius? Did it eventually become apparent that he was about to depart? The tale of Stewart's departure is as intriguing as his meteoric ascent to fame. Things that are funny for the audience could backfire on the comic. Jon Stewart had a serious side that many people failed to see, despite his infectious humor and sharp mind. A near-obsessive analysis of the world's imperfections is necessary for satire, even when it manages to be humorous. This took place 5 evenings a week for 16 years as a result of the show's hectic schedule. Envision yourself compelled to make others laugh while peering behind a microscope at society's darkest corners. Stewart was not joking. Rather, he was exposing the media's and politicians' inherent hypocrisy. Reading depressing news stories for hours inspired every joke and statement. However, what is the price? Behind the scenes, Stewart frequently discussed how challenging it was to maintain a balance between humor and severe realities. Even though he said, "It's like juggling grenades," in an interview, the joke was deeper than that. It was not only psychological harm, it was also harm to the emotions. If Stewart wanted to have his wits about him, he had to read the news often and ask himself challenging questions. The most crucial question, does it even matter, followed by, am I being fair and am I saying enough? Stewart was a walking embodiment of the term burnout when it was popular. Despite their dedication, the scriptwriting team he was a part of couldn't handle his one-of-a-kind workload. The author spent many early mornings cooped up in his or her writing chamber. The vicious comic who could demolish a leader in 30 seconds was seen by the globe. Not many saw the man questioning if the system he was mocking was absorbing his comedy. It was never Stewart's intention for his jokes to merely make people laugh. It was a matter of accountability. Meanwhile, dangers increased in tandem with the show's popularity. As viewers began to rely on The Daily Show for all of their news, Stewart began to feel uneasy. As he pondered the matter, he couldn't help but wonder, if people trust us to tell them the truth, what does that say about real news? It wasn't just Stewart who was mentally burdened. Even if his teammates pitched in, he was still the main attraction and had to shoulder the brunt of the workload. When he spoke out against issues like racism, corporate greed, or political scandals, he was well aware that he would face criticism. Some thought he was too cynical, too opinionated, or too intense to be a comic. However, who among us is the most critical? The individual. Stewart has admitted in public interviews of struggling with periods of self-doubt. It got him wondering if there were limits to satire. Was it only a facade of activism masquerading as enjoyment, or could it actually bring about change? They got into fights because many were doubting his impact. The individual's expense was another consideration. The sad truth underlying Stewart's quips about missing family gatherings and other significant events was frequently humorous. Due to the show's constant hectic schedule, there was little opportunity for a work-life balance. When the crazy is your job, you can't disconnect from it, he pointed out. Did humor have a role? Alternatively, had the world simply become too chaotic to be amused by? Things were starting to come apart, and Stewart had no idea what to do. Even the most brilliant minds may become dull under extreme stress, and Stewart could see that his own reflection in the mirror was beginning to show signs of fatigue. Consequently, we need to know if Stewart's departure from The Daily Show was indeed her sole means of maintaining her sanity. Alternatively, was this the beginning of a greater significance? A seismic shift occurred in the comedy industry the day Jon Stewart announced he was leaving The Daily Show. Viewers turned in for what they thought would be another night of biting criticism and parody. They were caught unawares instead. The words, "I've been doing this for 16 years," came out of Stewart's mouth with a mix of pride and tiredness. "And I'm simply exhausted." The crowd was rocked by the lingering impact of the remarks. Might it be real? Was he the guy who had led us through all the scandals, cultural shifts, and political turmoil? It was the end of an era for many people, marking the demise of a form of humor that had been a cultural anchor and not only political satire. Impressive and rapid responses ensued. A sea of praise, shock, and even tears flowed across social media platforms from fans. Stewart had a profound impact on the careers of several of his former colleagues, including Stephen Colbert and Samantha Bee, who sent him touching words of gratitude. However, the political world's reaction was maybe the most surprising. No politician, no matter how they felt about Stewart, could ignore his impact. The immortal words of one senator were, "We're finally safe." For some reason, this announcement seemed very momentous. Just because Stewart was an institution, not merely a host, he brought order out of the mayhem for a generation that had lost faith in mainstream media. It was like losing a navigational aid in a storm when he disappeared. Still, Stewart didn't seem to be remorseful when making the statement. There was contemplation. While he did express his happiness with the show, he did drop hints about something more profound. "It's not that he doesn't adore it," he remarked. "However, I do have a part of me that is prepared for a change." This something else seemed confusing. Stewart did not provide any specifics, which led to widespread guesswork. Would he be venturing out to try his hand at something else artistic, in order to make more quality time for loved ones? On the other hand, had he just become exhausted from years of righteousness-seeking? The lack of clarity left supporters eagerly seeking answers, which only served to heighten the mystery surrounding his departure. Stewart saw The Daily Show as more than simply a job. It was a mission, as revealed in the announcement, which many had expected. Every segment, every punchline, he gave his all to. However, missions, particularly those that seem to go on forever, may be rather draining. Political satire faced its day of reckoning with Stewart's departure, which was a loss for both humor and politics. Would he be necessary for The Daily Show to continue? Would someone else's voice step forward to fill the silence? Is the sharpest weapon necessary for satire to remain effective? His abrupt departure only served to heighten the intrigue. Stewart decided to withdraw just as political tensions were about to explode. Were his actions a calculated withdrawal, or was he stepping down as leader? The announcement hit close to home for watchers. Stewart had become an integral part of their lives, appearing weekly and guiding them through the idiocy of contemporary living. No amount of repeats could make up for the void he created when he was absent. However, the issue of whether this was really the end arose in tandem with Stewart's departure. Maybe he had grander plans afoot, ones that would reshape his legacy. One thing was very evident as fans tried to make sense of the news. Jon Stewart wasn't merely quitting a program. Comedy, society, and our worldview would never be the same after his death. To what did the following events follow? That, well, was up for debate. However, one thing we learned from Stewart is to always be prepared for the unexpected. When the guy who made us cry with laughter retires from television, what will happen? Upon hearing the response, Jon Stewart was both surprised and encouraged. While many celebrities lose some of their fame once they step away from the limelight, Stewart quickly exchanged jokes for issues and became an activist. What he has accomplished may be even more significant than the effect of his humor. First, his struggle on behalf of 9/11's first responders. The conflict was intense and seemingly endless. Stewart patiently battled for their cause before his impassioned remarks became famous. First responders deserved the respect and appreciation they received, and he did his best to make that happen. People were energized by his testimony in Congress. During one session, Stewart criticized lawmakers for inaction and heaved the words, "They did their jobs." He urged them to take action immediately. Stewart's voice quivered. It was said that Stewart's friendliness and sense of humor were his greatest strengths. However, Stewart's assistance did not end there. He and his wife Tracy established the Hock-Hoxon Farm Foundation out of a shared concern for animal welfare. A sanctuary for abused and neglected animals sprang from a childhood ambition to run a farm. Envision rehabilitating swine, cattle, and even fowl. Attempting to embody the type of humanity he preached on stage was an additional goal of Stewart's beyond rescuing animals. Stewart's seamless transition from comic to political activist is quite remarkable. On The Daily Show, he frequently addressed weighty issues like healthcare, equality, and justice. However, he ceased ranting about change and started taking action following the broadcast. Because it's the right thing to do. That was Stewart's reason for choosing these causes. Parts of this new phase were challenging. Being an advocate isn't glamorous, and victories are usually gained via adversity. Nonetheless, Stewart poured his heart and soul into the grind, just as he did into his satirical attacks. Whether he was cleaning the stalls on his farm or trying to amend the legislation, Stewart found more satisfaction in getting things done than in receiving accolades. Many have taken note of his efforts. In 2022, Stewart was bestowed the esteemed Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, which was bestowed for more than simply his comic abilities. His ability to employ comedy in his battle for justice was highlighted by the award, proving that the same man who could make us laugh is now inspiring us to do something. In contrast, Stewart continues to have a modest attitude towards his achievements. Do you believe what he said? I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who wants to help. Stewart has had a heroic impact on the lives of countless individuals, from a cancer-stricken fireman to a pig experiencing its first taste of freedom. It begs the question, did Stewart feel more fulfilled outside of the spotlight than he did while he was there? It appears that the answer could be yes based on his travels. Based on what we can observe, Stewart has more surprises in store for us in the world he is constructing. When Jon Stewart returned to television with The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV+, fans couldn't wait to find out what he had in store for them. Imagine it as The Daily Show. Just one more look at disinformation? What they got was totally unexpected, yet it could have been perfect. With a new joke added almost every minute, The Daily Show never slows down. In contrast, The Problem is more deliberate and takes its time. Systemic racism, healthcare for veterans, or climate change are just a few of the issues that each episode delves into. No longer are jokes intended to ease the pain. On the contrary, there are candid discussions, expert interviews, and moments of genuine exposure. Beyond the stage, there is more. But why was there a shift? Stewart, at least, saw it as a chance for growth. I wanted to try something that felt less like shouting into the void, stated the man. Following years of nightly analysis, Stewart appeared prepared to go from humor to serious subjects. He revealed another side of himself, one that includes thinking and listening in addition to his entertainment career. Answers to the problem are just as varied as the concepts presented within it. For some viewers, the show serves as an example of profound discourse because of the profound ideas it presents. Some viewers long for Stewart's earlier work, which was characterized by his witty banter. Perhaps that indeed is the objective. Stewart is forging a new course that is in line with his current identity rather than attempting to replicate his previous achievements. Consider his show on veteran healthcare, for instance. To give a voice to the often ignored, Stewart did more than simply discuss the issue. He also invited affected soldiers to share their tales. The final product was an unfiltered, raw examination of a flawed system, accompanied by an off-screen call to action. However, the problem is not without its flaws. In a world where everyone has an opinion, it can be difficult to resolve complex issues. Despite complaints about the show's lack of energy and humor, Stewart remains unfazed. He recently stated in an interview, "If it makes people uncomfortable, then maybe we're doing something right." The show's structure also reflects Stewart's personal growth. He used to be really vocal, but now he doesn't care as much. He uses his position to bring up the issue rather than trying to control it. The point is that being a dominant leader isn't leadership at its best. Do you have any opinions? Does the problem prove that Jon Stewart finally discovered the equilibrium he sought after all these years? Possibly yes. That exemplifies his ability to adapt to a dynamic and ever-changing world. As we see the unfolding of this new chapter, one thing becomes very clear. Stewart is on a mission to transform not only the comedy industry, but also his own identity. One thing we can take away from the problem is the importance of not being afraid to ask difficult questions, even when we don't have the answers. At the pinnacle of his career, what do you name a guy who not only reimagined a whole genre, but also served as an inspiration to an entire generation? Even if reluctant icon is the best description of Jon Stewart, his legacy is everything but. It is a model of how to use comedy to effect positive social change. When Stewart departed The Daily Show, he also left behind more than just a plan. You can't help but notice his influence on contemporary political comedy. Stewart has been an inspiration for several shows with his daring combination of humor and analysis, including Last Week Tonight by John Oliver, Full Frontal by Samantha Bee, and The Late Show by Stephen Colbert. Rather than being amusing, these performances educate, question, and hold those in positions of power accountable. And that was always Stewart's goal, wasn't it? However, Stewart's influence extended beyond the realm of humor. He encouraged people to think critically and challenged the stories they were told on a nightly half-hour, turning it into a cultural movement. Do you recall the 2010 protest he led to restore sanity or fear? The original intent was to poke fun at political extremes, but it turned into a forum for rational discussion. Clever, powerful, and unavoidable. That was typical Stewart. On the other hand, there is the more humanitarian aspect of his legacy. The Jon Stewart who spoke up for the voiceless, championed the forgotten heroes, and taught us that empathy isn't a joke. Off-screen, Stewart acted in accordance with his principles, whether he was supporting 9/11's responders or establishing a refuge for animals. But he did learn a thing or two along the way, a really potent one, recognizing when to change course. Stewart may have remained a fixture on The Daily Show and reveled in the constant praise. However, he ended up walking away. Why? It wasn't a retreat, it was a reinvention. He stated, "You have to know when your time is done." Accordingly, what we learned about bravery during that renaissance is invaluable. Stewart avoided nostalgia and didn't try to stay relevant. Success isn't about maintaining your position, it is about remaining loyal to your mission, and he proved this by welcoming change. However, the true inquiry is, how can we draw lessons from Jon Stewart's story for our own lives? What really matters isn't what you leave behind, but rather the inspiration you provide to others around you. Plus, Stewart has been an inspiration to countless people, including activists, comedians, and regular viewers who aren't afraid to think outside the box. Looking at the comedy scene now, Stewart's impact is still very much visible. However, maybe the most heartfelt homage to his legacy isn't the laughter he ignited or the shows he inspired. Perhaps it's because he has taught us that the most daring joke is the one that tells you when to step away from the spotlight. It takes bravery to embrace change, as Jon Stewart's path from comedy king to champion and innovator shows us. Tell me the significance of his influence. Leave a comment with your ideas. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more captivating tales like this if you've liked this deep dive. Click the bell button to get updates. The moral of Jon Stewart's story is that you can always rewrite your own storyline no matter how old you are.